Welcome to the Turning Stone Show, where we discuss topics of the human experience. We're here to offer conversation, ask questions, and explore. We invite you to join us on this journey in the discovery of purpose in life. I'm David Marsh, and here with me as always is Jesse Ferrell and Justin Maman. Today's episode is about what determines right versus wrong. We recently asked people in a local public marketplace, what's the difference between right and wrong? Here's what they had to say.
I think that kind of comes from a sense of inner balance. You know, we know when things are intuitively wrong for us, but that doesn't mean they're always wrong for other people.
Do unto others as you would have things done unto you.
I think right and wrong is all relative, but that's different for everybody.
It takes a long time to explain why you did it wrong, and then when you're doing it right, it takes less time. You know what I mean?
I try to do mine based on my faith, on, the Bible, actually, what's right and what's wrong.
Right is doing things the right way, the Christian way. Wrong is doing things the wrong way. I mean, not the Christian way.
Your gut feeling, that's about it.
It means just to have integrity, to do the right thing when no one's looking.
I think that's a very subjective question, and I think it's too early for me to answer that with any intelligence.
The standard should be maybe who created it. So good and evil would be what God designed and what he says in the Bible.
Being loving or being harmful?
I think we all have an internal guidance system, and when it tweaks, which it tweaks when you're doing something wrong, so we all know you can say and deny that I did the right thing, I was right, but everyone knows inside when they've done something wrong.
Everyone has their own morals and values. It comes from within. You can only do wrong by yourself.
So guys, it's been said that no one does anything right or wrong given his or her perspective of the world. Justin, what do you have to say about that?
It comes down to, a conversation about morals and ethics. A lot of people would say that morality is relative, and I would agree. And I think when you're talking about it, you're trying to define what's right and wrong, and morality is our internal definition, and ethics is the external collective definition.
I actually wrote down morality, and I found a definition that said it's a body of standards or principles, a code of conduct, or a philosophy that we hold. And then I was like, well, what's the difference? And I looked up ethics, and it's more of a definition of good versus evil, or right versus wrong, or justice versus a crime. And I thought that was interesting.
How I see it, for simplicity's sake, is there could be a speed limit that says the speed limit's 55 miles an hour. And I could be like, hey, I was driving according to the speed limit when I ran over that kid. Right? Okay,
Yeah.
So great,
Yeah.
You were driving according to the speed limit. But, context is where I feel like your morals come in. Is, okay, well, I was doing what I was being just as corrupt as the rest of my company was when we were laundering that money. But I had an internal morality that said, hey, red flag here. Even though everyone else is saying that this is right, I'm getting that internal message that tells me this is wrong. Another example could be, you're with, you're in elementary school and there's bullying going on, and everyone participates in focusing the attention on making one particular student or child the focus of ridicule. And you either, the ethic is, oh, this is right, we're all laughing about it, it's funny, there's no big deal. But I think empathy is where, the morality comes in. You're like, hey, I don't know, would you like this if this were happening to you? And do I want to belong to that and participate to that, even though that's the ethical, and you see that all around us.
Empathy is a relatively new concept in society. Actually, empathy wasn't even really in consciousness until about 100 years ago. And I've read that from psychologists, that previous societies, they didn't consider empathy on how the other person feels. They just knew this was right and I need to accomplish my goals.
What was the transition where empathy started to emerge in our human society?
I believe it's a part of human consciousness continuing to grow and evolve, where we now consider the actions of other people as well as consider our own actions.
Well, there's definitely a global consciousness shift, you could call it. Your perspective, in contrast to what else existed outside of your own circle, is much wider than it's ever been.
Yeah, true.
And obviously technology has allowed for that. Industrialization has allowed people to move geographically, to bring their culture and to have different cultures collide and to gain an understanding of each other's differences and be like, oh, well, we're the same in a lot of ways, but we're very different in a lot of ways. And I think that's, in some ways, I think that's where empathy comes from, is being like, empathy is understanding our sameness and being like, oh, I relate to you because I share all these commonalities with you. And then recognizing, oh, but there's also something unique about you and unique about me.
Jesse, how do you determine what's right and wrong for you, whether it was your personal life or your business life?
I'm sitting here thinking about, how I do look at how do I notice right from wrong, and I think it goes back to a couple things Justin said. I'm noticing one. I've said this before, is like really checking in with myself. Like, I notice when something isn't right. There's a feeling that I have in my gut or in my heart, like there's a heaviness about me. So for me, it's always that first place for myself to check in with myself is like, how do I feel? And oftentimes that's very, very subtle. And as I continue to establish and listen to, those feelings and listening to my body, it becomes more, where it's a much quicker decision. It's like, okay, that doesn't feel right. This feels right. This looks right. This doesn't look right. Where it's easier for me to make faster choices and also to begin to discern when something does feel good and feels right versus when something doesn't feel right and I feel like there's something off, not necessarily judging it or making it wrong. And then there's okay, well, now what am I going to do with that information? What's the next action going to be that I take with this information that I've now assimilated in my thinking and in my mind thought? What am I going to take? What action am I now going to take? And that's where, for myself, when I follow that's then I think where oftentimes I'll choose one way and definitely very clear along the way, like that's definitely was not the right decision. And if I go back to that moment when I made that choice, there was a moment when I knew this was the direction to go, and yet I chose to go this direction. And these are all the, and at the same time, okay, well, am I going to beat myself up over this and make myself wrong? Or am I going to accept responsibility for this is the path I chose to go on? What lessons are there for me to actually learn inside of I chose this direction? And then next time when that opportunity shows up, having that awareness, am I going to choose a lot faster to go the direction, not necessarily that's right versus wrong, but am I going to choose the direction that aligns with my being, aligns with my soul, aligns with my spirit, that feels right?
So I hear you saying that you choose a direction and then given new information, given new understanding, maybe we would even say given new awareness, you have the opportunity to change your definition of what is right and wrong for you.
I would say that, yeah. I think that I would say that as we continue to evolve and go along our day-to-day and our journey, that our definition of right and wrong is going to change. And like a lot of people says, like it is very subjective.
Yeah.
I think the subjectivity has to do a lot with intention, and that's where awareness and intention play a huge part. If you're unaware, you can't be intentional. Even our legal system is, in a lot of ways, framed around this basic understanding. Is, there's different degrees of murder, for example. How implicit or complicit were you? And how intentional were you? Were you really aware of all the steps that you were going to be taking to carry that out? Or were you just doing it in self-defense kind of instinctively? So I think that's intention is really important to look at, because we can't be intentional with our actions if we don't have awareness.
I think it also is right and wrong is very cultural as well.
Right.
What is right in this country to do something, or even in one state, is not necessarily going to be right in another culture, another household. I mean, look at all the, just even down to some of the latest things, like just the legalization of gay marriage. I mean, look how many countries still it is completely against the law, and up to even stoning still, where something like that. So how do you justify right and wrong? And those, I mean, it's a very controversial issue, and it's all over the board.
Don't you see human consciousness shifting, though?
Yeah.
I mean, people used to fight for the right to have slaves. Now, that is literally the most absurd thing we could ever think. Human trafficking is a condemnation in society.
Right. Yeah, it's and that's where the big question is morality purely subjective, or is there sort of universality to it?
Great question.
And that's where, when we're trying to understand the human experience, we're always wanting to differentiate, is this cultural or is this universal? Is this individual or is this kind of a universal phenomenon? And I think that as our perspective expands, it's almost inevitable that we're going to open up to a more relative right and wrong per se. And at the same time, it becomes clear that there's a universal sort of morality there. And I would say that an example of that that's really basic that anybody can talk about, like lowest common denominator, it's wrong to murder, right? I mean, that's 10 Commandments wrong, right? So,
well, I believe there's some subjectivity there, because how do you define murder or kill or war?
It becomes,
what if someone's breaking into your house to hurt your family and you murder them, or is that defense?
Well, so murder, and this is where language and I feel like semantics become actually really important. A lot of people say, oh, that's semantics, so let's not talk about it. But semantics is vital to the way that we collectively form our morals and ethics, right? So murder, one way to differentiate it could be, okay, well, murder has to be intentional and not in self-defense. Just as a hypothetical, let's call that murder. And then other forms of killing we can name otherwise, so that we can differentiate the two and then assign different consequences to them or whatever. Why is right and wrong important at all?
Right and wrong is going to define who you are, and it's going to define who we are as a society. So it's important for us to have something to have as a foundation, but is my right necessarily your right?
And it's still very subjective. You think about, GMOs in our food right now.
Exactly.
Who determines that it's right for that to happen?
You can take that and apply it on it. And this leads me down this road. What makes it right or wrong is our understanding of it. So, with the GMO thing, all of a sudden that becomes a catchphrase, and we say that's wrong because it's poisoning our food supply. Our food has been genetically modified since the dawn of our agriculture. We've been modifying. That's why we have red, perfect tomatoes, whether they're GMO tomatoes or not.
Yeah, you can get it in the middle of the night in February, out of season, and you can go to the store and buy one.
Right, like dogs are genetically modified.
Yeah.
And all the plant life we have is genetically modified. So it depends on the depth of understanding that you seek to have or to have about a particular subject matter. And what you find is generally, or at least what I find, is the greater the expertise a person has in a particular subject matter, the more gray they tend to be willing to explore and talk about and to clarify. Like, it's not exactly as simple as right and wrong as you want to make it. There's a lot of gray here, and it's important for people to be educated about why this is a complex subject. And that sucks for people because they want to be able to just make a determination.
Somebody
like
please
you
tell
said,
me.
the framework.
Yeah.
Somebody please let me know.
Someone tell me how to think.
Yeah. There's too much information to sift through.
Yeah.
You know, and ironically, that's why people become experts, is because they devote their entire lives or careers to exploring these very specific subject matters that for the average person, we're not going to sit around and do that.
Yeah.
We have our own purpose and our own endeavors in life. We're not going to do that. So we turn towards experts, we turn towards Google and we ask the questions and somebody please give me the answer. In a way, you could say Google is the new Bible.
Google knows everything.
Google is the new Bible.
And you think about it, we're also constantly doing that to ourselves. So there's always the voice inside that's constantly right versus wrong. I want to look good. I want to do the right thing so nobody judges me, nobody picks on me, nobody gives me a hard time. So that starts at an early age, like knowing almost even that instinctual difference between right and wrong, good versus bad, looking good versus not looking good, not wanting to be picked on, or even just making the right choices, like for who to date or careers to have. It's like, well, I don't want to make the wrong choice. So how do I know how to make the right choice? And again, it starts oftentimes with that, but then we do begin to look on outside forces how to do that. And so, for me, it's like always looking on the inside, like how do I know what's right and wrong for me? And that would be the question really to begin to inquire in is how do we begin to determine on a moment-by-moment basis what is right and wrong?
I think that as we continue to evolve on this journey, I think it's about being aware versus unaware. There's things that I've done in my life that I felt were absolutely 100% right, that today I feel are 100% wrong because I've had a journey, I've had revelation.
I think there is the element to that, and I would say, given the circumstances that we're in at the moment in time, we do our best to make the best decision possible. And so how can we go back and say, oh my God, I would, given other, like you didn't have any other circumstances.
Yeah.
This is what you had. And did you make the wrong choice on purpose? No, you made the best choice possible in that moment in time. Would you make a different choice now? Yes, because you're not in that moment in time anymore.
How does judge... Oh, sorry.
I was going to say it's because I became aware of other things other than where I was. I had an awakening.
There's a lot of other choices now available for you than just the box that you grew up in with the beliefs systems in place, and that now you have a whole nother box of choices to choose from.
Yeah, that's good.
So, for me, I'm wondering, how does judgment play into this?
I think it's always happening,
and that's why I asked the question, because
like how do we learn to have acceptance and not have the judgment?
When I started exploring judgment, and I would often, I started practicing, a meditative practice, or I started reading about personal development and studying that, and I'd often come across, all right, well, no judgment, just watch it without judgment, observe without judgment. And, it's analogous to, don't think about white elephants, right? So, it kind of became this judgment about judgment. I like to really follow the pattern to its root and ask myself, all right, well, the root of this, I'm looking at a child, a newborn child, and I have this wonderful awareness being a father to a young child and really paying attention to the human development of my child, and noticing, well, really, there's the sense of right and wrong that she has is on a few different levels. One, she has feedback from her environment, and I'd say that is, especially at a young age, that's the primary level that she's getting feedback about what's right and wrong, about her behavior, about her expression. And really, that's the egocentric part about being a child, is about who she is. And that takes place for all of us, and then we spend the rest of our lives as adults, you know, shedding those perceptions and learning how to embrace all of that. But essentially, we're getting that feedback from our environment. The next level is there is an intuitive empathy that I have observed my daughter express or exhibit, where if she sees another child in pain, crying, struggling, she intuitively wants to help them. And she intuitively asks, what's wrong? And there's a sense of like, all right, well, that's not necessarily something I've intentionally taught her, but she's always possessed that, what I would just call an intuition about tuning into people around her and wanting to help and wanting to soothe discomfort or pain in others. And you see that with a lot of kids. If you walk into a preschool classroom, you know, generally they're pretty selfish. It's mine, it's mine. But then there's also that sense of like, man, they connect and they, you know, and they want to help each other. And I think that's human. Mm-hmm. That's human. But she definitely gets her whole framework from feedback. Mm-hmm. You did that. You talked about your daughter, do you want to share that?
Yeah. I noticed there was a behavior and a pattern that my daughter Michaela always had, where I would ask her, you know, well, do you need anything? No, I'm good. Would you like some more food? No, I'm good. Do you need some clothes? No, I'm good. And she was about like 14 or 15 when, maybe even 16 when we discovered, it was about 16 when we discovered this. And I picked her up for our weekend time together, and right away we started the conversation, and she said that same thing. I'm like, why do you say that? Like, why do you say, no, I'm good, when you obviously need some new clothes? She paused for a moment, and I look over at her, and she's crying. And she's like, do you remember that time in the grocery store when you turned around and yelled at me, and you told me, don't ever ask me for anything again? And I went right back to that moment. It's like, I remember. It's like, it was a repetitive, like every time we would go to the store, she would pick up a candy bar and she'd be like, hey, can I have this? I'm like, no. And because I didn't allow junk in the house. And this went on like, every time I would have her, it'd be like the same thing. We'd always go to the store, get our food for the weekend. And she'd always like at the we'd walk by the candy bar, checking out. And she's like, picking it up, can I have this? And we were walking through the store, and I turned around at her, you know, little kid. I'm like, don't ever ask me for anything again. And it was in context of, don't ever ask me for another candy bar again when we're in the grocery store. She took it as, that's it. Don't ever ask Dad for anything ever again. And that's how she lived her life from about 3 years old until she was 16, is don't ever ask Dad for anything. And, you know, we're both sitting in the car crying. I'm like, wow, it's like, one, great. We could, like, to not live the rest of your life with this is great. And now what? So I said, okay, for the rest of the summer, because this happened at the beginning of the summer, we're going to practice you saying yes to everything. And, you know, so we went on a shopping spree to get her new clothes for school. And so it was first off, it was fun and amazing, and we had a ton of fun. And she got things that she would have never gotten before, from accessories to sandals to multiple accessories to go with every single outfit that we got. But also she tried on clothes that she normally would have never tried on, and there were some things that we'd end up purchasing. And the point of that is like, there was that, you know, it goes back to like, that was that right, wrong, that behavior that began at that early age. Yeah. And that's where we begin to create all of those, you know, those patterns.
I have a question here. So, is the opposite of wrong right?
I think that why, and I was thinking about that earlier when you were talking too. Is like the same thing with I think you were talking about judgment or something. It's like, well, to have not have judgment, there's got to be judgment. As to so
It's
to
a
not
paradox.
have right, there's got to be wrong. So there's always a comparison and a judgment
Yeah.
going on with, well, is this right or is this wrong?
Well,
You're still judging one way or another. So how can we look at there's actually no right and there's no wrong? How can we look at it just as it is? It just is.
It just is.
Yeah.
It just is.
Well, and I say that in the sense of how do we respond in different situations. So based on this new information that you received and you going back to this place in time where the origin or the root of her belief in that right or wrong and what was right and wrong for her to do and be, then the response was, from now on, everything you ask for is right.
Yeah.
Now, given the context, there's something, endearing and beautiful about that to help to counterbalance what originally happened. But in the larger context of things, how often do we respond to an event or a decision that was made that we identify or that we judge as wrong by doing the opposite, thinking that the opposite is right, when the opposite of wrong is wrong.
Different.
Right. The opposite of wrong is wrong in the sense that, we're operating on a continuum here.
And the beauty of that is that, and you talk a lot about this, is that going back to the point of origin. It's the same thing with disease in the body. Same thing with any kind of pain in the body. It's like, rather than just covering over with a Band-Aid or treating, how about going back to the source of where did that actually begin? So when Michaela, my daughter, had that conversation with me, she already, I don't know whether I haven't talked to her more about that, but whether or not she already knew that and that was a very conscious choice for her, or if in that moment she's like, remember this, and she made a decision. So to be able to get back to the origin and the point of pain and choice, and then be able to unravel all that energy over the years, and then now start to create a whole new
paradigm,
a whole new point, a whole new belief system. This works for me now. Now I'm complete with that. It no longer works for me. It served me for this period of time, and now I'm going to create a new belief system.
I think that's the key. I've heard spiritual teachers teach that in the grand scheme of the universe, there is no right or wrong. There's no definition of right or wrong. This is right, this is wrong. Because we could have an endless discussion of what is right and wrong. Is it okay to use a plastic bottle? Is it okay to use animals for food? Is it okay to use only plants? I mean, we could go on and on about right and wrong.
But arguments about it all.
Absolutely. We could form doctrines, call them scriptures, say that we received them from the divine, and this is the way it is. But I think ultimately the spiritual teaching that I found very helpful is what serves you best in this moment. What is serving you best? Who are you? Are you a person of love? Then what serves you best in this moment? Is it best for you to step aside so someone can have a place of priority? Because that would be a loving thing for you to do. What serves you best?
And then also you can ask in that same question is like, okay, what serves you best in that moment? And also, how can I be outward focused for mankind? It's like, how can am I coming from love or fear?
That's good.
And so it's then when you can check in that moment, like, oh, okay, that was actually fear-based, then you're naturally going to be coming from love, and you have that awareness of, okay, now what choice can I make in this given situation where I can come from a place of love rather than a place of fear.
Yeah.
It's good.
And in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, rather than having to choose between right and wrong, how can I choose within right and right? Right? How can I choose
right and righter?
Yeah, or not even
again,
not even in that sense. I'm thinking about most.
Even again, if you're choosing right and right, again, wouldn't there have to be a wrong and a wrong?
Conceptually,
like,
and the reason.
So it really, I mean, it does.
It could be what serves your highest purpose, and then if this action you're doing isn't serving your highest purpose, then maybe that's wrong for you to do.
And part of it could be acceptance of just what is.
To me, when I hear and this is just my interpretation. So when I hear language like higher purpose, it initially feels right because it puts to rest the feelings of doubt about what that means. And it feels like, all right, I don't have to objectively make decisions about what's right and wrong. I can just tune in and do what serves my highest purpose. And that takes me back to earlier when you said, I have made numerous decisions throughout my life that at the time I thought were the right decisions to make, and in hindsight realize that they were not the right decisions to make had I had the information I had now. Now, obviously that's in some ways moot because you can't go back in time and make that decision all over again. Where the right and right comes from is a lot of times I think there's an assumption that there's a better or worse decision or choice. And we can't really ever know how far-reaching the consequences or the effects of our decisions are.
Yeah.
We can't ever really grasp that.
The cause and effect is really important. If I punch you in the face, the effect of that, you might punch me back. So that doesn't serve me the best.
Or even as simple as...
That's a really gross level. And I'm saying on a really subtle level, every choice, it's like a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
And you really go into it, it's like, the food that I chose to eat for lunch today, the right or left-hand turn that I made could have led to this or that.
Yep.
And so every choice has this sort of like big picture ripple effect.
That's that interconnectivity.
And we can't possibly grasp how far-reaching that is. I'm sure when they first started using petroleum, I think the first person who probably, scientist or whatever, who came up with starting to use petroleum as energy, didn't think that it would escalate into the state of affairs that we're in right now environmentally, right? And that goes with so many things. And that was an energy solution for us, right? That was a positive thing. And now, every environmental rights group is talking about how unethical we are for continuing to do that.
I think there's a lot more that we can talk about this topic, and I think it's something that we'll definitely bring up in other episodes, that we, webcast that we continue to talk about.
That's good. Help us in this conversation and join with us in our awareness and our understanding as we continue to journey down this path. We like to end each episode with a turning stone, and now with that turning stone today is Jesse.
The question to practice this week is, what does your soul desire to experience in this moment, and in this moment that would have it be fulfilled? So this week we invite you to expand your awareness and notice all the places in your life where you, or maybe just a couple of places in your life where you do have a lot of judgments and you do have very strong opinions for right versus wrong, and see where you can begin to accept things as is. And then from there, notice how you're feeling inside. Does it give you a sense of peace? Are you anxious about it still? What is your body telling you? What do others maybe around you, what are they starting to share by noticing, oh, you're a little less judgmental than you normally are. I really like this side of you. Start to listen and notice your surroundings as we begin to accept and let go of our right versus our wrong and accept things for as they are. And remember, this is a show about questions and questioning. It is not a show about answers. Nothing we say is the truth. It is up to each of us to discover the truth for ourselves.
Join us each week on The Turning Stone Show as we continue our journey of conversations.
Subscribe and get in touch with us. Stay connected and join in the conversation.